Welcome to So Guided, a spiritual travel guide for the curious. Join Carissa and Jenny, ordinary people exploring all the extraordinary ways we can connect to the universe. Each week, they investigate another spiritual modality and adventure through all the wild ways we can find high vibes, hope, and ultimately, enlightenment.
Hello and welcome to another episode of So Guided. Today we're diving into tarot cards and oracle cards and how you can read yourself. You've got questions, so do we. Let's do this. All right, let's hear that weekly woo-woo.
Okay, I have a really good one.
Oh, good.
It's a prophecy, if you will.
Prophecy.
That sounds
Big
dramatic.
word, yeah.
Sounds dramatic. So a dear friend of mine came to visit who I hadn't seen in a long time. And we had a wine night and we were doing deep talks about woo-woo subjects, which made me happy. Best nights are always those nights. In any case, she was talking about something that's come up before. She said, I believe in all this. I love signs. I love all this. But my grandma was the closest person to me in the world. And I haven't gotten a sign from her. And I had to kind of take a moment to breathe. We've thought about the subject because I don't know the answer. I mean, we don't have answers. That's why we're exploring. And I kind of took a deep breath, and out of nowhere, my response was, maybe you're getting signs and you don't see them. What if your grandma is a dove that stares at you in the window? And she just looked at me and paused and said, that is really weird. And her story is that, her husband had just gotten randomly off of Amazon a clear plastic window bird feeder, which I've never heard of before, by the way, and put it in their window. And a dove has been visiting her every day. And this is so wild. It stared at her so bizarrely. She took a picture of it, pulled it out in her phone, and she has a dove that visits her every day, stares at her in the window enough that she's like, Dove, why are you staring at me? And took a picture, and she goes, Jenny, here is the picture. I'm going to share it. I'm going to post it on our Instagram, by the way. I randomly pulled it out my rear. Your grandma is a dove visiting you daily, and a dove's been visiting her daily.
That is... The fact that you randomly said that, was she like, oh my God, did she all of a sudden be like, it's her? Is my grandma?
She knew it was, but this is a funny friend who she didn't get as excited as I did. But we were going away for the weekend together, and then we ended up she brought it up a bunch of times. And then our friends we met up with were like, oh my God, that's the coolest.
Yeah,
so anyway, she needed to hear it. I just pulled it out my rear end.
I love it.
But one thing that I loved is I took a moment to breathe before I answered her. I wanted a thoughtful response, and I honestly think something else kind of spoke through me in that moment.
Yeah, there's no way that wasn't guided.
Nope, that's my
so
woo-woo.
Guided.
That's my woo-woo. All
right. Well, my woo-woo is actually on topic with what we're going to be talking about today, which is oracle and tarot cards. So we've maybe mentioned this before, that sometimes we have these oracle decks, which we're going to talk about, which is basically decks of cards that you can pull to connect with spirit. And I do them with the kids sometimes. And so we were away on vacation. I haven't done it in a while, but I asked Fiona, I'm like, Fiona, let's go pull a card because it's fun and, it gives us something to do. So we were sitting and we did a little meditation beforehand, and she shuffled the deck and she pulled a card, and it was the warrior woman. I didn't know necessarily what the meaning of the card meant at the time, but I'm like, oh, warrior woman, you're a warrior woman. That's awesome. And, and we read about it in the little book that comes with it and what it means. It's just, strength. And it was a really cool card. So then we shuffled the deck, and the deck is, probably almost 60 cards, a big deck of cards. And she lays it out, and I pull a card, and I pulled the exact same card.
Love
the warrior woman. And I'm like, the likelihood, I feel of pulling the exact same card after the other person, after you reshuffle the deck, is no coincidence, as we say all the time. And it's not a crazy, crazy woo-woo, but it was me and her were like, oh my God.
You just feel so connected when it happens.
You feel so connected. Yes. I felt connected to her, and I felt just connected to the universe, and it was so cool. All right, so this is a perfect lead into what we're talking about today, which is tarot cards and oracle cards. So Jenny is our local expert on tarot cards, so I'm going to let you jump right into that.
All right, let's be clear before we get into the subject. How experty I actually am is that we just Googled how to pronounce it. Literally went to Google Translator, so it said out loud, tarot.
Yeah.
So if you've ever needed that answer, it's tear and O, and that's how you say it, and that's how much of an expert I am.
Yes.
However, I have dabbled in it in my lifetime. It has always been something I've been interested in, quite frankly, before I even understood that it was connection to spirit or even the word divination tool, which is any object or element that will connect you to spirit in a communication way, right? So tarot, you know tarot. You think about a psychic, you think about a room with a crystal ball and you get your readings. But here's the really cool thing. You can do them yourself. And that's what we're getting into today. So of course you can go and get your cards read. Actually, when you're dealing with tarot, that's when the expert is wonderful to get involved. But you can do it yourself. And so as an amateur, I'll explain kind of how I've experienced it. So just for starting off, if you don't even know what tarot is at all, it's a deck of cards. What is it?
78 cards.
78 cards. And they are broken into kind of two categories. We have major arcana cards and minor arcana cards. So if you're doing it for yourself or someone's doing it for you, you're going to flip some cards over and they have assigned meaning to them. If you get a major arcana, it deals with a major life moment. So anything relating to like, okay, let's say I have a job situation and things are sketchy. I don't know what to do next. If I get a major arcana card, I know that this is a major life decision and something that affects me on a greater level. If I get cards that are minor arcana, I know that it's everyday issues. So you kind of get a difference between the two. So that's like the starting lineup of the tarot cards is how they're broken up.
Is it like a deck of cards?
It's like a deck of cards.
Like where like the king, jack is like equivalent to the major?
Exactly. So if you're thinking about a regular playing deck of cards, it's very, very similar. And in fact, some old school people use a regular deck of playing cards to do tarot.
Wow.
In this case, like you almost think of ace, king, jack, like anything that would win you in poker is what the major arcana is. And in tarot terms, these are major people, like a priestess, a magician, the fool, people on a journey. And you could kind of tell when you get them, they're major. Then the minor arcana cards relate to parts of your life. So they have assigned meaning. And this is one of the coolest parts about tarot. They've been used since the 15th century. These go so far back that any deck you get, they are the same interpretation. They've been used the same way. The same card means the same thing.
Right.
Now, if you look up on Amazon, you could get different variations based on an artist rendering. So there could be the regular typical classic is called the Rider-Waite deck. This is the OG. This is the original. This is the tarot that actually probably most psychics use when you go to see them. But since then, there's a million artist interpretations of this. But the cards are still going to be the magician, the priestess, and then the suits are going to be exactly the same. It's just a different artist version. So there's a lot of versions of it. Artwork-wise, meaning is the same. So they translate across generations, across centuries. And one really magical thing they say about tarot is you're tapping into the magic that has existed forever, that our ancestors have done. And there's something about that that feels really solid and cool and tapped in. In any case, that's a very light intro to what a tarot is, but just to like explain my introduction to it.
Yes.
Okay. So when I was about 16, I love this stuff. You guys already know this. When I had my dreams coming true, I started to get excited and interested in this stuff. So I have an aunt, a very, very special aunt who loves this subject, woo-woo things. And she took me to my first spiritual store. What are they called? The metaphysical store.
Yeah.
And she bought me a deck of cards. So I had a deck. I didn't really understand them or know how to use them. And ultimately, to be honest, they ended up becoming a parlor trick on my drunk nights with friends. So my friends would come over, not when I was 16, FYI. As I got older, I played with them, dabbled, but really when I started to get older, my friends would say, ooh, bring out the tarot deck. And I didn't know what I was doing. I really kind of felt like I was pulling things out my rear. I wasn't like necessarily like thinking I was connected to anything. In retrospect, I think I was absolutely connected to something.
Yeah, when you look back,
you know, so friends would come over and ask me to do it. And I did a little bit of a blend. So with most decks, in the back is a book where you could look up each card. So that's what I would do. I would look up in the little book, ooh, it's an Ace of Wands. What does that mean? It means good fortune is coming your way and luck. And I would say that out loud to a friend. And then I would I would like keep going. I'd say what hit me and keep speaking. So now I know what I was doing was probably tapping in and I didn't realize it. So I do readings for people and I loved it. And all the time I'd have friends come back and say, what you said like happened. And it got me really, really into it. One of the ones that like made me want to really dive into tarot further was I was studying abroad and I was doing the tarot. I brought it. Of course, it's my nighttime activity with friends when we do a night in. And I was doing it. And a card that I always saw the same answer in, I got a hit that the next thing was in my head was that this girl I just met was pregnant, which is outrageous at this moment. We're in London and we're students.
Yeah, were you like 19?
Yes. So I actually said it out loud. I think I had a couple drinks and I was like, this probably is ridiculous, but I see pregnancy in this card. And she actually was like, so I'm a couple weeks late. Anywho, poor girlfriend did find out that to be the case.
Oh my God.
So when I started to see and I started to have people report back to me that, so not only the card I was reading, but then whatever my instinctual embellishment was ended up being real hits. So for me, tarot really connected something, didn't know it. And then over time, I realized it. Now, here's the thing. I did that probably in college a lot. And then I ended up going away from it. When I started to realize it was a serious, almost predictive tool.
Yeah.
It freaked me out. Now, I had no spirituality at that point. So there wasn't something that made me feel safe or understanding. So I backed off.
Yeah.
I backed off forever until a couple years ago when it was reintroduced to me. It wasn't the tarot I was into. We had heard about oracle cards, which is kind of sometimes confused with tarot, but oracle cards are its own entity. They are also a deck of cards, but they are completely some artist version of anything, a quote. Do you want to get into that? Because you love oracle cards.
Well, can I go back for a second before we do that? So I just want to ask a few things. So when you're talking about tarot, I've heard some different things. You're not supposed to buy your own tarot deck. Mm-hmm. And you got it as a gift from your aunt. Do you believe that?
No.
Okay.
Baloney. We bought ourselves decks.
Well, I bought it. I have bought it, but I've read that like multiple times. Like they've said, like, don't buy your own tarot deck. It has to be a gift. Okay. No. So my other question is, when you were reading that girl and you had like the cards, like when you were doing it, did you do like a full spread, or is there a card in there that's like a pregnancy card, or like how is it? Like when you're talking about that minor arcana, can you talk a little bit more about like how some of these things might give you insight to let you know that like someone was pregnant?
That's probably the worst story to tell because it really is.
That's the best story.
Oh, it's cool if you do have intuitive abilities. It's going to make them blossom.
Okay.
So you're not going to see the same card and see that, by the way.
Got it.
But a card triggered me down that path, and then my intuition kicked in. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if we backtrack to a more normal spread, and let's say I didn't say that. So let's just say, like, in front of me, and let's not go as, like, heavy as, like, pregnancy and college. Let's go to, we're asking about a work situation. And maybe, like, let's just say there's a fork in the road, and you're stagnant in your job, but it's safe. And then you want to maybe explore other options, but it's scary, but you might be able to fly and soar. And maybe it's even a different path altogether. This would be an awesome time to consult the tarot cards. So if I were to do your reading, each card is going to prompt me to know what I'm going to talk to you about. So I kind of got into the major arcana. If we got one of those, each of them has a meaning. Can't remember how many. I think there's like 22. So they could go in many different directions and they're all potent. They're all important. They're all life path. If I get one of those, I know while I'm talking to you that we're talking about an important story. This is an important moment. And that actually heightens my, okay, we need to dig in. Now, if you asked me this question and all I got was the minor arcana, which is the suit cards, I'd be like, okay, this is a little ditty in your life. And this isn't like life-altering question at this moment.
And there's
now I'll get into those cards. Yes, so there's 4. So going back to like a playing deck, like you're in the casino, it would be similar to the suits that you'd see in a playing deck. For the purpose of tarot, there are wands, cups, pentacles, and swords. Then what's really cool is you get to know them. Each of those associate to a different part of life. So wands relates to passion and inspiration. Cups is emotional and love, sadness, grief, but also joy, happiness, emotions, anything that could spill over. Pentacles is money and possessions and material things. Swords is intellectual and thought. So when you're getting this, I already know, and actually what's so funny is sometimes I have readings that are a little on, some are a little off, but I love, like, let's say we're talking about work, it would be so makes sense to get pentacles, which is money.
Yeah.
So if I go back to this reading that we're talking about your life path, if I'm getting pentacles, and let's just say, so when I'm doing a spread, there are spreads that you could refer to, like you could Google spreads on how to ask it. I, my whole life, had made them up on my own, and that's what feels right to me. And I know your next question is, how do you know what spreads to do? My answer is almost always, when it relates to these decks, whether it's Oracle or Tarot, is use your instinct. Your instinct is your connection, so you are right. So my instinct on my readings would be, if you're asking about the life path, I would probably do one row that is, tell me a status of affairs of you at work. Mm-hmm. And then I do a parallel line below it that was, what would happen if you make the jump? Mm-hmm. Now there are 5 billion variations of how I could have read that for you. This is just what came to mind right now. So maybe I'm doing the one where you're the work line, and it's like I'm stagnant, funky, whatever. So let's say you're getting the swords, which is intellectual issues and getting stuck and muddy in the waters, and I'm seeing that. And then the row below it where I said what would happen, and I see money and abundance, and I see a happy ever after card.
Right.
I have such an awesome starting point to read this for you. Now, I keep talking about reading for you, but the cool thing and why we're talking about this is, like, you can do this. Anyone could do what I'm talking about. Yeah. So I started all this by going to the back of the deck and just doing a spread and then reading, okay, what does the Ace of Pentacles mean?
Yeah, I love that.
So it's very cool. So you could see how meaning emerges without you needing to go that next level of where I predicted pregnancy.
Yeah.
The cards have a meaning without you needing to go to the next level. But my guess is when people do start to play with them, there is things, as I said, the word is blossom. It like might kickstart something in you to say, not only do I see what the definition was, but my next hit is, wait, I see a bird in the background of this card, and I think that means this person's gonna fly. And that wasn't in it. Like, you take it and you run with it.
Yeah, I'm thinking, because I feel like there's so many different ways to use this, but I love that it's the same no matter what you do. Like, no matter what deck you do, you can find it. And one of the things that I will admit is that tarot, I think from what I've heard, they're not always super positive, right? Because some of the cards are more positive than others, which I feel like has always made me a little nervous. Do you find that at all? Or have you ever?
1,000,000%. Okay. So when I talked about my break in it, I was actually in a dark place, and I probably was pulling a billion dark cards in alignment with where I was. Yeah. But yeah, there are cards that when you see them, all right, and let's like rip the Band-Aid off of the card that freaks everyone out. Yeah. There's a death card.
Oh, there's a death card?
There's a death card in the tarot deck. So listen, if you were asking, it's scary.
Yeah, that's scary.
All right, so I get it. There's a couple of cards that don't look happy.
Right.
And then there's a card that says that. So I'll address that card. So the death card, if you were asking about health and that card came up, that's when it's, oh no. If the death card comes up any other time, it is not negative. It is another term for this card would be the rising phoenix. I get this card a lot because I'm a person who restarts my life and my career a lot.
Yeah.
So I get it. The death card comes up a lot for me, and I'm not afraid of it because it means letting go of one thing and starting a new chapter. So it actually could scare the poop out of someone asking about your job, but it would make massive sense for that to come up in that reading if you were ready to let go and rebirth yourself.
Oh, I like that.
So also, it's our Scorpio card. Scorpio's card is the death card because one of the next levels of Scorpio is being reborn and rebirth. And so that card is scary. But to circle back to your everyday worry, which I validate, and not only do I validate it, I feel it. I started to like wean myself away because I didn't want to get the Tower card that was mean and scary, which you have a story about.
Oh, I have a story about, yeah. So, and that's why I asked. Jenny had kind of gotten me, this is before we were super spiritual, or like not super spiritual, before like before the podcast, everything. I had Jenny do my cards a few times, and it was good, and it was great, and it was like opening, and we get parlor trick, and we do it when we were like drinking, and we'd have fun, and I'd make her pull them out, and then I got a deck myself. I was like, oh, this is fun. I'm super, like, once in a while. And one day I was actually pregnant and I was like, oh, I should pull a couple of my cards. And so I pulled one and it was 2 of cups or I don't know, it was something. It was a minor arcana. So it was one of the suits. I pulled another one. It was another one of the suits, like no big deal. And I was going to stop, but I felt super drawn to pull one more card. And I'm like, I don't know why. I'm just going to pull one more card just for fun. And I pulled it and it was this tower. And again, I have no idea what anything means. So I go and look it up in the back.
It's the worst card.
And it's the worst card in the deck. The book doesn't say it's the worst card in the deck, but it does say like something is like coming and it's like not ideal, but you'll have major growth from it. Because everything, just like we talk about with everything, like there's always like in this life, I feel like there's supposed to be like a growth from it or like a learning or something. But at the time I was like, oh, this is bad. And then I started Googling Tower and it was like, what cards don't you want to get? And it was like Death and Tower, in the Google machine. And then, obviously we all know like what happened, like losing the baby. But it was something I thought about. And I will say that was a year and a half ago, whatever, it was a while ago. I have not picked up a tarot card, a deck since. And I was like, no, thank you. But as we've continued and as we've talked about it, I've actually changed my perception a little bit. And I am like, you know what? Like, I think I'm ready. And like me and Jenny have talked about, I want Jenny to read my cards again because it's more about like, not prepare, but it's good to have the insight and connect it to the universe. And then you can see like where you are. So
I will say too, like one thing that's really wild. It's one of the fun things of like the subjects we talk about where there's just no explanation. And part of me, the angel and devil on my shoulder, the devil on my shoulder tells me I'm going to sound like a Looney Tune when I say things like this. Something's happening. There's something to it. Like I told you, like when I ask about work, I almost always have the pentacles and it always is so on point. And it is very, 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 very rare in the scope of my lifetime of playing with this. And like I said, I didn't even feel serious about it. Not that I'm even serious now, but now I understand the connection to something greater. I've never had it be off base. Always is on point where like you'll get cards and you're like, this is crazy. In a deck of this many cards, these 3 are absolutely perfect for what I'm asking about. When we were just talking about, I was having some like friend trigger moments and I did a spread for myself and it was all related to friendship. And I'm happy to report I had all these sweet cards that like one of them was literally called the friendship card in answer that I knew that I was getting through this for whatever reason I was being triggered. I knew I had a happy answer. So what's so wild is the right cards seem to come through. And we're not professional psychics.
No.
And again, go to a real tarot person if you want the real reading. But I'm saying have fun and try it.
Yeah.
It's wild. It's so fun.
Well, and you and I have done it sitting next to each other. Yeah. And your cards don't apply to me as my, it's one of those things where you're like, oh, can you basically make everything seem like it's applicable? And it doesn't. It really doesn't. These things have been really good.
No. And I'm having fun with this because of, the podcast. I've noticed a lot of people in the world are sharing their curiosity with us that I wouldn't expect. And there's this group of ladies that I'm friends with that all of them decided to buy tarot cards. These are all like really successful businesswomen who are top executives, by the way, not woo-woos. And it's really cute because they've been texting me like questions about it and they're loving it and trying it. I guess I only tell that so that you don't have to feel like you have to be a certain kind of person to try.
Right.
I really definitely categorically thought you needed to be psychic to try.
Yeah, me too.
I want to open it to people to say, like, you could try it too, and it's so fun. And at minimum, how fun is it to play with?
Right.
Like, just play.
And it doesn't have to be scary. No. It doesn't have to be.
You're not bringing ghosts into your house.
No,
it's not a Ouija board.
Right.
Which actually, when we talk about, like, kind of the... when things are dark and
like the
creepy,
negative
the negative version of it is like, that's not what it is.
No, it's not what it is.
Anyway, so it's super fun. Have I answered your questions about
you have. So,
okay, I want to get into the next level.
I think the other side of things, which is, I think, if you're not ready for the full-on tarot, which is, again, steeped in tradition, the 78 cards, all the meanings are the same in each of the suits, you can, look at the other kind of side, which we also love, which is oracle cards.
Super light.
So oracle cards are very fun. And what they are, they're another deck of cards, but they can be anything. They're a way to, again, connect with the universe, connect with like your spirit, connect with whatever you want. But there's different artists in every like deck has a different meaning or different like messaging. So if you're drawn to animals, you could get a spirit animal deck. If you're drawn to fairies, you can get a fairy deck, or light workers. I mean, there is hundreds of different types of deck, and the artwork is all different, and each of the different decks mean something different and can give you different messages. And like I have a deck which is like angel deck, which I absolutely a door. And what it is like the difference is like you can ask basically like lighthearted questions, or you can pick a card daily. Like we'll pick a card daily and be like, hey, what should I know today? And just pick a card, and it kind of gives you a message or a thought or something to concentrate on. And it's very, very organic to you in that day.
Right.
And this is something where I actually bought Oracle decks for my friends. Like we did a girls getaway, and my gift, like we did like our favorite things and gave them to our friends. And that's like what I got my friends. And like they had never had one. And it was so fun. We went around and everyone, we took a few deep breaths, got in the zone, and we all pulled a card, and each card was so relevant to that person, even though we had the same deck. And what's neat too is like, again, the back of the deck usually has like meaning and like a deeper overview of what the card means. Mm-hmm. But you use your intuition when you're doing it to like pull and see what it is.
So not unlike what I was saying, where I think this applies what I said in the tarot that I do. First, look up the definition, but even more magical is your next thoughts in your head. If you have a random thought, that thought is meant to be explored.
Yeah.
So my guess is that you and your girls did that when you went through it.
We did.
Right?
And we would say what was neat about when we went around. It was like, I just want to know a message, or I want to know, I have a question around this. Like what I like about Oracle cards is they can be very pertinent to a specific question. Like I will say one of the times that I had one of my biggest woo-woos ever was when my little guy, he was like 1 or 1.5, or it's going to be, and he had to have surgery. Yeah. And I was super, super nervous about surgery. It was a minor surgery, but still, any surgery is major.
No.
And so we were really scared. And so I was like, I took my angel deck, and I was like, I'm just going to ask, like, is it right for him to have surgery tomorrow? Right. And honestly, I was going to say, I'm like, if this thing gives me like a message that seems like a no, I'm going to have to tell my husband, sorry, we're canceling the surgery. And I was so nervous because I was like, in this angel deck that I have, it's a Kyle Gray angel deck, which we can post. It's great. It basically has a yes and a no card. And I was so afraid I'm going to get the no card, and I was going to have to tell Nick we're not doing it.
No.
And so I'm like shuffling, and I asked, like, should like Van have surgery tomorrow? And I pulled, and it was the yes card. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, that could not be more clear. Again, in a deck of 60 cards, I got the yes card to have it. And so Nick comes in the room, and I was like, oh my God, I tell him what happened. Yeah. I was like, I just pulled the deck, and I was worried about Van. I'm like, but I got the yes card. And I was so afraid I was going to get the no card. And he was like, let me see it. He's like, I don't know. He's like, now I'm nervous. And he's so funny. Like, he gets into it. So he took the deck. He's like, what if the no card's not even in there? And I'm like, he's like afraid that we're supposed to not do it. So I'm like, well, you do it too. So he shuffles. And he pulls a card too after all the shuffling. And no lie, he pulls the yes card. And we're like, oh my God. And honestly, it sounds like, nothing sounds crazy anymore to us, but the next day while I'm sitting waiting the surgery, all I can think about is this is guided. We were both told yes. And we're like, it could not have been more clear that he has protection, he has support, he's supposed to be in the surgery. And it was crazy. And so again, that's one of the ways that we use the Oracle cards, is just for a quick gut check.
Totally.
A quick reminder if you have a question around, again, should I keep this job? Should I do this?
Totally.
Whatever it is, we use the Oracle cards for that. And there is no right or wrong deck, whatever you're drawn to.
So we'll link some of our favorites.
Yeah.
So in Oracle cards, one of my favorite creators is Rebecca Campbell. Mm-hmm. She has 15 different ones.
Oh,
and
beautiful.
One of them's going to be she does a flower one.
Okay, she has a rose one.
What's mine? I have an out there one that I love, star seeds. But, But she has, it's the most beautiful colors, and it makes me happy when I pull it over. We love the angel deck. But if you go on Amazon and even look up Oracle cards, you're going to save billions. We'll also share our favorites for you to look at. But there actually could be even inspirational. So one of the ways I use them, I've started to bring them into my everyday life. I pull a card every morning after I meditate, and it starts my day. Now, to be very clear, I chose not to do the tarot because I don't want to see the Tower card and think I'm going to have a bad day. So I use one of the beautiful Oracle decks with mainly happy messages. There's some darker ones, but there's no affirmatively negative the tarot.
Yeah,
so I do those, and they just start my day. One might be Let Your Light Shine, which is a card we both get a lot, or whatever it is. And I just like it as an affirmation for my day. What I think's really cute, though, and this is really daring because I wouldn't want to do tarot, just a one card pull, is my husband is into this. So I have 2 decks in our chairs in our room, and he pulls one card every morning. Now, he's kind of a happy-go-lucky guy. Somehow, every morning, he gets one of the minor arcana, almost always, and it's positive.
Oh, he goes legit tarot every day?
He goes tarot every day,
wow.
and I go oracle every day.
Yeah, I would go.
So, in any case, it's a super fun, like, just affirmative way to start your day. And then I find it a fun universe game, just like when you're asking for signs. I like to see if the tone of what the card said is right.
1,000,000%. It's another way to, like, I feel like to get a sign. When I'm not feeling as connected or I want to feel more connected, I pull a card. And that's like going back to my weekly woo. That's what I was doing. I was just kind of like, whatever, like, let's pull a card. And it reminded me again, we both got the same card. So let's just, before we like finish up, let's like talk about how other ways to use it and just be aware of it. So one of the things that I think is neat is that for oracle cards, like they say when you get them, it's just to like go through the deck. And like if there's a card that's like your favorite card and a card that like, maybe you're not as drawn to the artwork, those can be your yes and no cards. So sometimes if you're looking for a question, not every deck comes with a yes or a no. So if you choose to, you can look at all the artwork and kind of pick what will be your yes and no for like long term if you're asking a yes or no question.
Right. And I'd say with that, just to kind of like explain a little further, because I said this to someone once and they didn't understand.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you get a deck and it's brand new to you, go through all the cards. And the one that you are like, oh my God, this card speaks to me, put it aside. Then go through it and which card like repulses you or that you feel, you feel it negative more than any. Like, and this is always in a deck. All right. So those 2 cards, pull them out. Forever after the rest of your life, the one that made you the happiest is your personal yes, and the one that made you negative is your negative. I'm only explaining this because I tried to explain once and didn't get it. So you have picked your own yes and no.
Right.
So it'll have its own meaning when you look it up. But for you, if you were asking for a yes and no, if this ever pops up, now you got it. All right.
And some of the decks come with a yes and no.
Yeah.
Like that angel thing
That's
I
the
told
only
you about.
one I ever know about.
Yeah, it comes with the actual yes and no, but a lot of them don't. Another thing that we've, talked about is cleansing your cards. So once you have a deck, if you want, when you get it, to just spend some time with it, we sometimes smudge it with, what do we smudge it?
Palo Santo
or sage. If you want to cleanse the deck. Also, we've been told that like if someone else uses your deck, if you want it, when you get it back, so it's still back to your energy, you can knock on the top of it. Again, these are all tricks we've been told. We try them because we try everything. We don't know if it's necessarily working or not. And then I think what we go back to is just like when you're doing it, like take a few deep breaths, thank, the universe for the message you're about to receive, ask any question you feel comfortable with or any message that you think that you need at that time, and then pick away.
Right.
And it's that easy.
I think it's fun to try. And honestly, like this is kind of like the group of girls that were ordering it. It's like, what, $15 for one deck. So it's just like order it, try it. It's super fun.
It's so fun.
You're either drawn to it, you're not. This is like another spaghetti against the wall of all of our modalities. Do you like it? Do you not?
Yeah.
And if you're afraid to do it, go to a tarot reader and let them, the experts, do it too. But super fun. Another way that we can maybe be in contact with our spirits, to be guided, to understand our next steps. And we actually I hope someone reports back some stories.
Yes.
I want to hear someone who's never tried it before who now has tried it. And I want the stories.
Yeah, send us your woo-woo.
All right.
Cards. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for listening. We've loved being your spiritual travel guides and hope this made you feel more connected. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast player. Your reviews help us create the guide that you are looking for. We'd also love to hear your stories.
You can follow and share your experiences with us on Instagram at So Guided Podcast. Your story might just be our next weekly woo-woo. Join us again next week as we continue to dig deeper into the universe. And remember, stay curious, ask the questions. You are so guided.